Okay, so this is the book we're reviewing today, and bonus, a little bit of this one. So very different books. So I think I think it's always difficult. I mean, whenever I decide to join a webinar, or I decide to go to a clinic, or I even decide to buy a book, my biggest challenge is always, is this going to be at the right level for me personally? We all come with different amount of knowledge and an understanding of a subject, and it can be pretty hard sometimes to find the book that's at the right level. At least I find so. I've attended quite a few webinars in the last year. Like, I signed up for some of these local horse webinars, and I found that generally they were not at the level that I wanted. I was interested in knowing more details. So anyway, so I read about a bit of a description, and what really attracted me to this book was the fact that it mentioned references. So I thought, if anything, at least I'll get the references, meaning links to scientific articles, so I can, go deeper. So that was a big sell for me. Believe me, I'm completely aware with knowing or having trouble with figuring out at what level to pitch things, because as I'm discovering my passion for making this video on YouTube, it's always a bit of a challenge. And definitely on YouTube, personally, I decided to go assuming people have some scientific knowledge. I'm starting in a certain level. So this book in general reinforced some things that I already knew, which is always good. Reinforcement is how we make sure that we're learning the right thing. So that was good. It definitely deepened my understanding of what I already knew. It made me curious and frustrated at the same time. That's in some parts. And it did rearrange some connection in my brain between what I was seeing, what I was experiencing, what I was seeing people doing with horses. So in that sense, it was absolutely valuable. So I want to go through in an organized fashion, of course, about the book. So I'll talk a little bit about the book itself. I'll talk about the author. Where does she come from? It's a woman. I will talk about how the book is organized and why the organization actually works pretty well, but also some of the drawback. Then I'll tell you what I really loved about the book and what I didn't like so much about the book. And finally, a couple of aha moments. I mean, I'm not going to tell you everything that's in the book. Obviously, that's something for you to go and explore yourself. And I'm certainly not discouraging anybody from reading this book. There's something in there for everybody. So the important thing here is that it's a book I bought on Amazon, but it's available everywhere. Okay, meaning it's a widely distributed book. It is actually published in, I think, 6 different languages. So we have somebody from Germany here. It is published in German. I don't know if you know that. So if you're more comfortable reading in German, then absolutely you can read it. It's Italian, Spanish, Japanese also, and so that was kind of interesting. It's 300 page, so it's about 2 centimeters thick. It's 300 page. It's of good quality, like it's soft cover, so it already shows a little bit of wear because I've been reading it over the last month, but it's still pretty well bound, so that's good. The paper is nice and heavy, so that's good. It can tolerate a lot of flipping. I'll compare it to, for example, this little book. Not the same quality, nothing to do with the content. I'm just talking about the quality of the book. It's full of illustration. There is no picture. Everything is illustrated. It reminds me a lot of old articles in older magazine when, of course, publishing and printing color photograph was very expensive. So they went to drawing. But the drawings are very good. No question, but they're all drawing. Very detailed sometimes, but just detailed enough that you see the complexity of the brain, for example, right? So they're very good drawing. All right, on to the author. So Janet Jones, PhD. When you earn a PhD, you really should have people mention it after your name. It's not hard enough to do. So Janet Jones, PhD. Scientist, absolutely. PhD in neuroscience for human with a specialization in language learning, I believe. Horse owner, horse trainer, and horse riding instructor. And I think that is where this book really pulls it all together, because this book, this other one, which I'll talk about after, really is from the perspective of somebody interested in the neuroscience of the horse, but he's a horse owner. I think there's something that comes from having that extra background of not only training horses, but training people, meaning training people on how to deal with horses. So that was interesting. She She's familiar with the Western and English disciplines, so that's good too. There's both perspective. She's an established author. She has already 4 published books. She also writes a blog. She has a web page. I will put the link down in the description, but it's basically janet-jones.com. And you can find her blog there. You can find, she also does seminars and conferences. So if you want to go see her in person, if there's something in your area, she also lists them there. So clearly, kind of used to this whole business of printing material and following through. So the book content and its organization in general. The It follows kind of a. It starts with the horse, obviously. I guess horse brain is the first one. It talks about their senses. Then it talks about how they learn. Then we talk about behavior. And then there's an integration of all that. So every chapter brings something that builds and on the previous one. So that's quite good. There's a glossary. So if any of the term are a little bit nebulous, you don't have to go looking for them online. I was about to say go looking in them in the dictionary, but who does that anymore? So anyway, there's a full glossary. So that was really good. A couple of things like I was aware of, but I needed to be kind of reminded, oh, yes, okay, that's what she means by it. There's an index. Oh, that is so great because as you will see in a couple of my aha moments, there's a few things where I learned something and then I had to reflect on it. And then I wanted to go back on it to just understand. And a lot of books don't have indexes, which is very frustrating. And as I mentioned, it has a whole references as if it was a scientific journal. You can go and list whenever she mentions something, you can go and find a reference in the back. So very good for me. It's comprehensive. That's one of the things I loved about it. So, for example, on the section of senses, when she talks about all the senses, very often people will mention, well, horses have a different field of view. Yes. Oh my God, she goes so much more deeper than that. She talks about, of course, the function of the eye, how it's organized, but she goes into um, the range of the eye, of course, but then she goes into their ability to focus. They cannot focus. The eye of the horse cannot focus the way we can. So that's really interesting. We can focus on something like we'll pick up a tool and we look at it, we can focus on it, and that's no problem. We can see the details. Horse cannot do that. They're very much limited on very little bit of focus by raising and lowering their head because their eye is not, the muscles are not attached the same way. Their acuity is very low. So again, for me, that was a new one. The acuity, I never thought about it, but it's basically they're like me without my glasses. Things are fuzzy. Um, Horses do not have 20/20 vision. When 20/20 vision is simply what you should see 20 meters away is what you actually perceive. Horses, no, they don't. And it varies from horse to horse. Some horse have worse vision than other, and has not always something to do with age like us and getting bifocals and stuff. So that was really interesting. So that's the amount of detail that she goes into. So really good if you want to learn more about the senses. I learned that the sense of smell of horses is actually as developed as that of the dog. Of course, dog, we have made use of that because we can train them in a different way, but horses have a very, very developed sense of smell. They have 2 smelling organs on top of it, and they're very, very sensitive to smell. And a little observation that I picked up from both books actually was that whenever you present a weird, a new tool or a new brush or something new to the horse, we have a tendency to put it right to their nose, and we say, well, it's for them to smell it. Oh my God, they smelled it when you brought it into the barn with you. That's how good they are. The reason they often put their nose on thing is to sense it with their little fibril, we call, which are the vibril, sorry, which are the little hair that are connected to nerves, and they want to feel it with their nose. They're not trying to smell it. They've smelled it long ago. And they can smell if you touched another horse. They can smell if you had Indian cuisine. I mean, they are very sensitive. So that was quite interesting. But that's how much in detail that she goes into. The other part that I really enjoyed about the book is she goes and talks about proprioception. That's If you don't know, it's the awareness of where your body is in space, right? Very important. A lot of good horse riding instructors will focus on that. Feel where every part of your body is. You have to feel it in space before you can actually move it, right? And then you also have that muscle memory. But the point that she makes, and she elaborates over a couple of, not a couple of a chapter, but a couple of section, is how the horse has the same proprioception challenges. And when we ride the horse, we're really this mesh of proprioception that's influencing each other. And there's ways to train again with the mind and keeping in mind this neurological aspect of it, teaching a horse to react to our movement and our position. And really, basically, that's what riding is. It's this meshing of the two proprioception together. So that was, again, it's not super new, but it's an interesting, I thought, way of presenting it and looking at it. She also talks about neural fatigue. That's when you repeat a stimulus to the skin until the brain basically learn to ignore it. So it's the physical desensibilization that we appreciate. For example, that's how the horse is able to tolerate having a girth and having a bit in their mouth. But you have to also keep in mind that if you're constantly riding with a certain tension, for example, the outside rein, right? Always inside leg, outside rein. Well, if you constantly have this tension there, the horse literally learns to ignore it. Just like you don't feel your socks on your feet right now, they don't feel that anymore. So interesting how you have to balance the two. So again, understanding how the neural works. The other part that she goes into that was interesting for me because I had never really learned the differences is all the various learning methods. So positive and negative reinforcement, indirect training, and what was the other? There was another one. I didn't know. Oh, of course, the reward oriented training. So she explored all of them, why they work, why they don't work. So they all work and they all don't work. It really depends what you're trying to do and it depends of the situation. So she has a really good description of what those are relative to the horse, right? How the horse understand. What I didn't like about the book. So those were the really the key things that I really thought were well done and interesting. So the part that I liked a little bit less about the book, she aims to be practical, meaning she gives and that's great. She gives a lot of question. Um, sorry, not question. A lot of she answers question in the sense that what do you do if your horse does this? But unfortunately, of course, it's not the point of the book. It's it's because they're a bit basic. Like I kept all the time I kept reading the example. I was like, oh, good, an example. And I was like, I kept going to what if, but yeah, but what about this? What about that? So they were a little bit simplistic. Um, Indirect training. So there's a question in the chat about indirect training. Indirect training is, we think of it as indirect because instead of tackling a situation or a challenge head on, it's where you take a different approach. So it's the step by step approach of things. So, for example, if your horse doesn't want to, doesn't want to go into the trailer, for example. Well, what you're going to do is you're going to slowly accustom them to getting food there or seeing another horse going there. You're not going to directly going to try to put it on all in one go, right? Saying, well, you know, I'm telling you to go forward and I'm pulling on your halter. That would be a direct training. Indirect training would be breaking it down into the step and saying, frankly, it's something I do with my foals because I train foals. I teach them to first follow me, of course, but then I teach them to step onto a platform. And when they're comfortable stepping into a platform with their front feet, then we move the back feet because a lot of horses step onto the trailer but then block. I don't have a trailer with a ramp, so it's a different issue, although I think it would work the same way. And then once they're comfortable stepping into a ramp, what I do is that I make them walk through a man door, so a small door, so that they get the sense that they're walking into an enclosed area, but it's very brief, and then they walk into a barn, right? Or they come out of the barn. And then when they're able to do that flawlessly, then I say, now we're ready for the trailer. So that's an example of an indirect training. It's when you take a kind of a different path. And she has example in her book how us human want to do it in one way because we have a goal and we want to go directly to something. But it's not the way that they learn, and often it can be problematic. So she explores that particular aspect of training. Again, it doesn't work for everything, but it works in certain situations. Hello, everybody that are joining. More people from Germany. Hello. All right. So going back to what the things that I maybe didn't like as much is that her practical example were sometimes a little bit simplistic. I had enough experience to go, well, I think a certain horse would do this, and then what would you do? So there was a little bit of that. Not really the intent of the book. They were kind of supporting her argument, so that's okay. The other problematic things, and that's one that is obviously across all books of that type, is when you think about it, we are exploring the neurological basis for, neurological and physiological basis for horse behavior, but we're really basing it on human model, right? We don't put horses through MRI and understand, which pathway light up when we give them a treat. Like, so we have to do inference, and we don't have a choice really. We make inference into what human brains and mice brain, which have been studied quite a bit, have in common, and then there's an extrapolation to the horse. So that's something that's always in the back of my mind, is that we keep pointing out how different horses are, but they have some basic chemical and electrical pathways, and then we infer from that. So there's always in the back of my mind a bit of a question of, is that true? Is that a good comparison? So I'm the type to be very critical and skeptical of everything. So that's something that kept coming up. And frankly, it's come up in the other books too. Like anytime, we don't have a choice. That's our basic of understanding, is how the human brain works. And then we look at the horse one, and we look at the differences, and we say, okay, considering those differences, what are the implications? So a big one, and one of the big learning from this book and others, is how horses, and I kind of knew that, but yet, it's, again, reinforcement. Horses do not have a prefrontal cortex. Okay. So even simple things like what we think of doing a motion, reacting something, the moment we receive the stimulus for something, it goes through a prefrontal cortex, and we have a choice in the way we react within a certain parameter. Horses, no. The input comes through the eyes, it goes directly to the motor center, and then it fires off a reaction. So horses react by nature. Horses are reactive, and that's the reason for it. They don't have the prefrontal cortex. Horses have zero prefrontal cortex. Ours is represent about, I think the number is 33% of our brain is that. And when we think about other animals that we deal with, cats and dogs, for example, between 5 and 7% of their brain has a prefrontal cortex. So it explains a lot of difference, right? So a really big piece of the brain that we rely on constantly, it doesn't exist for horses. So they have to find other ways to work with their stimulus. So my takeaway. So that's a good introduction to my takeaway. If there's no other question, nope. Okay, good. Okay. So one takeaway is what stresses horses. We think we understand what stresses horses by observing how they react. Like if they're running away back and forth and they're winning, we're like, oh, they're stressed. What we fail to understand is that there's a whole slew of stress that comes because, of course, they're living in our world and they need to adapt, and they're uncomfortable. They're basically, horses are constantly uncomfortable dealing with what is convenient and what is useful and what is normal for us. They only slowly get de-stressed by habituation. But even that, studies show that, for example, bringing a horse from the barn, doesn't matter how quiet they seem to be, how habituated they are, there's a stress there. There's a latent stress in there that affects them at a physiological level because they're away from their friends, they're in an enclosed environment, they are restrained. We think that once horses are used to it, like, because with our big brain, we think, well, I'm used to it. I know I'm tired. I know I can't go anywhere. But what we forget is that fundamentally, a horse that cannot move, even if he learned not to move, is deep down stressed, right? So it's not always visible. And we justify a lot of it because that's what our brain is really good at. Of course, like, well, of course we have to do this, but of course he doesn't care. He's been in a wash rack so many times. It's okay. And another thing she points out, and I'll let you read it if you read the book, but it's she describes a routine, a typical routine of somebody going to see their horses and they're all excited to spend time with their horses. And she lists in how many ways this ends up actually being stressful for the horse. So that was an eye opener. So that was definitely a aha moment. A couple of things I learned, neurotransmitter chemicals. Yeah, you kind of, figure that you sort of know about them. It turns out that dopamine and nicotine. Did you know we make nicotine in our brain? Because I didn't, and horses do too. In humans, the nicotine is linked to alertness, right? So the fact that you are very aware of your surrounding and you're a little bit like on edge, you think maybe caffeine, well, maybe they're in the same family, but nicotine is actually a chemical that raises this alertness. And horses, just like people, well, again, this is an extrapolation. Humans have varying degree of the production of nicotine and dopamine. Same thing for horses. And it can start to explain why some horses are more up, more alert, more aware of their surrounding than others, no matter the amount of training. So I thought that was really interesting. Um, Emotions in horses. Again, a bit of an aha moment to dissociate basic um, basic what emotions with the what we do with them as human, because everything of with us goes through our prefrontal cortex where we justify, we explain, we rationalize things. But at the base, right at the base, there is emotions, and those come from the hippocampus and the amygdala, and they're formed from instinct but also from previous experience. And so the basic emotion do exist in horses. What the problem becomes is when we start to assign justification to them, an explanation, something that I personally I'm always fighting against because I know that anthropomorphism is a huge problem. But she explains that the basic emotions that they do have is actually fear, rage, care, play. They like to play, lust, seeking. Temple and Grandin had a really good book on how animals think, and the whole section on horses was very much about that, understanding their primal need to seek, to play, to avoid fear, obviously. So those are the basic emotions that they have. But unlike us, that build a whole story around it and stress over it, in that sense, they don't, right? So they live in the present. So if I was to represent bubbles, the horse live in this big bubble of the present with a small bubble in the past. That's where they can relate to their learning. And there's almost no future. Like it's very, very tiny, like and immediate. Where us, human, are basically the opposite. We live in the past, we worry about the future, and the present is for the most part ignore. And there's no better example than that, and that brings me to this frustration that it raised in me, is understanding when when you see people interact with their horses at the barn. And I think this is the most vital example. They go and they take their horses and they bring them to the barn, but the barn becomes a very social environment in which they interact a lot with people, and they kind of lose track of their horses without realizing that the opposite is true for the horse. The horse is very much in the moment. They're aware of absolutely everything around them at every moment. Where we start brushing, we talk with somebody, we leave them in the wash rack for a little bit longer. Well, just we're going to go get their feed, and the reality of what is happening is completely different between what the human is experiencing and what the horse is experiencing. So again, worth reflecting on it. Not the whole book, but this part was interesting. And I liked a little bit of the phrase that it kind of puts it in consideration, because we think a lot and we use our prefrontal cortex and horses don't. When a horse is well trained, when a horse is habituated to our routine and what we ask them, think of a horse working cattle, right? The cow horses that are out on the range with the cowboy and the range hand for hours on days. They become so attuned to each other. But in fact, what is happening is that the horse is aware of everything just like any other horse. They don't react because they literally borrow the prefrontal cortex of the human in terms of reading from the human reaction. Oh, I noticed this human's not reacting. We're good. Oh, I noticed this cow is moving out. Oh, we're moving toward it. The human thinks it's important, right? So it's interesting to see this symbiosis. So that's what the book did for me. It put a lot of things that I kind of understood, but it put them in relation with each other. Um, who is this book for? Anybody that will really dive deep into the material, the understanding of how the brain function, with the caveat that I mentioned, it's still based on human physiology, but extrapolated to horses. If you learn by comparison, she does a lot of that. She compares human and horse, lots of comparison there. It's not too technical by all means. If you're a little bit interested in science with the glossary and the way it's explained, it's actually a pretty good. Donkeys and mules. She does not touch on donkeys and mules. Her experience is very much with horses. There is a couple of things where she touch on. No, I don't think she does. I think I'm remembering something from another book. No, not specifically. She very much focuses on horses. Donkeys and mules, very interesting, because when you think back about how we were able to domesticate the horse and we were not able to domesticate the zebra, for example, it comes down to whether or not these animals have a certain social structure, that they follow a leader, that they are gregarious, etc. And that kind of allowed us in. Zebras are in herds, but there is no hierarchy within it. It's every animal for themselves. They just stick together because it's safer for against predators. And donkeys are a little bit like that. Donkeys are territorial, where horses are absolutely not. And donkeys they move in herd, but they have a very different hierarchy. And so donkeys were domesticated, but we don't do as many things with donkeys as we do with horses. And the mule is an hybrid, right? It's an interesting combination. Mules are eminently trainable, and yet they also have differences. But no, she doesn't talk about the specificity in terms of those various species. So, good question. Okay, so just to finish on who this book is for and my learnings. Yes, so it's a longer read, right? It's 300 pages basically. So it's a thick one. I mean, I could have sat down and read it in a couple of days, obviously, but you want to soak on these things. If you want something a little bit faster, this one, okay, so it's called Evidence-Based Horsemanship. It's with Dr. Stephan Peters, who is a scientist, and Martin Black, who is a horse trainer. Now, look at the number of little stickies here. It's dense in learning and aha moment. It doesn't go as much in depth as the other book. It is not as searchable. There is no index. There is a glossary. Thank you. But what I really found useful in there is got a lot of really good little nuggets on how to understand the reaction of your horse. So we have a contrast here. We have Dr. Stephan Peters, who's an academic. He's owned a horse. I don't think he's trained any, and there's no mention that he trains other with it. And then we have Martin Black, which is a horseman. He lives from training and teaching people how to handle their newly trained horse. So that gives a very different perspective. This one is chock full of pictures, and it's interesting. I'll give you just one tidbit that I realized reading this book. Have you ever seen a horse or seen a video of a horse grab an object, realize that it's scary, and then scaring himself silly, running around as it's stuck in its mouth? We think it's funny, and in a way it is, in a bit of a head scratching way. And you're like, if he's so scared of it, why doesn't he just like release the object? This is ridiculous for us, right? We're like, if you're scared of something, you drop it, right? You drop it and you back away. That really points you the difference between the horse and the human. The horse doesn't think. It's a reaction. The moment he is scared, his mouth will clamp down, right? It's just tension in the jaw, closes. He can't open his mouth. It's stuck. And so he's more and more scared of that thing he's dragging around. And the more he's scared, the less he's able to relax. And so he scares himself silly. So it's actually pretty sad to watch once you understand. But it explained that difference with a human. If you were to, for example, you reach for something and it was to a frog, maybe, and it surprised you. Would you hang on to it? No, of course not. You would release it, right? So that's just one of those tidbits that make you go, ah, it's an older book. It was published in 2012. It's not the same quality of paper. It has a lot of picture. They're black and white. I believe it's a vanity press type of thing. You can't pick it up at any store, but you can order it from Amazon. This particular copy was printed by Amazon. That's why I think it's that type of press. It's a shorter read, but it has a lot of really good. I don't have time to go into all these details already because we're already at the half hour. Um, Any other question? Oh yeah. So you say Mr. Peters has trained his own, yeah, his own horses, right? So absolutely. Well, we all kind of train our own horses in a way. What I mean is that he's obviously his focus is on being a scientist and neurologist and all that, and not necessarily training horses for others. That was the distinction, which he's completely transparent about, of course. Hence why Martin Black is there. Was there anything that would apply to my own training program? Somebody is asking. Something that was a surprise. You know, reading this book reinforced, I've always approached handling horses, be it babies or mares or my own riding horse, with a lot of compassion. I keep telling people you've got to be compassionate. The horses are ill-equipped for our world, and this has just reinforced that. So if anything, I have an even more compassion for them. I feel, and I think and that's the part that's a little bit frustrating reading this book is now I go to the barn and I feel so sorry for how horses are being treated when I think, oh, if you could just realize this. But I'm also even more in awe, understanding how completely they're different, their brain and their senses work, that we're able to do what we're able to do with them. I mean, it was already a surprise that a prey animal lets us ride them and put them in boxes that move and they can't see and take them away from their friend and they get back on. I wouldn't. I don't know why horse keep getting onto the trailer. I'm always thankful they do, but it's always a bit of a mystery to me. So that really enforces it. When you think about how fuzzy the world is, how it's influenced by smell and by their immediate response to things, you're like, how are they even able to cope in our world? Um, I think, yeah, it increased a little bit my irritation at others in the way they handle their horse. And I made a connection. Now you'll have to follow me on that one. I don't know if some of you maybe watched this YouTube channel. It's called Farm to Tabor, and it's a woman that is very familiar with how farming works, like the background, what we don't know of farming. And I'm talking farming about growing grain, growing vegetable, as well as how animals are raised and all that. And she had a review of Clarkson Farm, where it's a show where some celebrity becomes a farmer. And she had some observation. And she made a very interesting observation. She said, you think farming decision, like, which tractor to buy or how to seed or how straight your rows are or what angle you put your furrow, you think those are driven by, the most efficient way of doing things or the most scientifically or the most productive? And she's like, this is a complete illusion. Farmers are incredibly influenced by what other farmers do. And I thought it was interesting. And because I was reading the book, I made the connection with there's so many things we do at the barn and we do with our horses that we do because we realize that the moment that somebody watches us, that we're going to be judged, that we're going to be criticized. And even as much as we don't think it influences us, it really does. Compared to the horse, do you really think the horse cares if you're clipped or if you have washed the socks or if you have shod on a 6-week schedule? So there's things we do in public, and there's things, and it's almost inevitable that we will do, and they're not always driven by the right thing. And one thing for sure, Your horse doesn't care, but what your horse does care about, it's interesting to read. So read the book. I definitely encourage anybody that's interested in that type of thing to take a look at it. What will I change to my horse? So that was ultimately the question. I'm not going to change a lot, but I think what I will do, the section on training was really interesting because it showed when it's good to have positive and negative reinforcement. I'm going to delve into that a little bit more. I'm going to give more soak time. I do give soak time, especially with the babies. They do something and you wait, right? You don't right away move to the next exercise. But what she's explaining is that there is so much sensory input that for them to really appreciate which behavior gave the right response, you got to give soak time. And that applies for riding horses too. You know, we when we do more advanced routine or dressage, there's so much information and teaching that lift your shoulder here and hold your head there, and we got to give them a bit of breathing room and soaking time just because of the way that they learn. So that was definitely something that I'm taking away. Ironically, I just got a new horse and I'm starting fresh with her. She doesn't have bare minimum. She's not wild or anything, but she's new to me and I'm new to her. And I'm kind of inspired by this book to try to do as much as I can right by her. And there's no pressure. I'm not planning on competing or doing anything fancy with her. So I can truly go, okay, we're going to explore this together. I'm going to discover what's important to you and how you learn better. And we will see how it goes. All right. Any other question? How old is the mare? She's 4. But she was basically roaming free for 3 years, which I kind of like. So she's been in a herd in the big open plains. I'm in Alberta. She comes from Manitoba, but kind of the same environment. And she was brought in the middle of the summer to start learning how to be a horse and be handled and all that. So I have the basic is done. She picks up her feet and all that. She knows how to lead. She's learned how to lunge a little bit, but very basic. And yeah, so it's a good time because mentally she's just almost there in terms of being mature enough to learn in a very consistent manner, right? It's going to be fun. I hope. I don't know. We'll see. um okay. I think that's it. Will you continue to review book? Yes, absolutely. Once a month. I'm hoping to do these lives where I just talk about the books because I'm not everybody's interested in those books. So yes. Do I have a list? I have kind of a list in my head. If you're asking if I've actually landed on this is the book I'm going to review on that month, no, no, I have not. But I will always put a bit of a heads up in my community post and definitely on Patreon on my updates as to what I'm reading currently, and if it's something that'd be interesting for the future. So, but if you have suggestion, send them in. Put them in the comments below once this video is uploaded. If it's something that is at the cross of horse and science, I'm in. That's really my thing. Oh, cool. All right. Well, thank you for being here. It was really cool to have like comments. Last time didn't go very well, so I didn't expect anybody to join. So thank you very much for being here, and hopefully others will catch the video at some other time. You're heading to Amazon to pick up the books. Yeah, absolutely. So once more, this one, evidence-based horsemanship, lots of good little tidbits. I wish I could talk more about it, but then again, the point is not to spoil the books, is to tell you what's good about it. And this one really, it's staying on my shelf. It'll probably end up replacing this one because once I've reviewed a book, it goes on my shelf. That's a little Easter egg, but probably nobody notices. But anyway. All right. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I will I don't think I need to edit anything out of this particular video. So it'll be posted. So if somebody else is interested and couldn't make it, or if you think they're interested in those particular book or the subject, send them my way and they'll get the lowdown on what it is. Okay. Bye-bye. Have a great day. I know I will. Thank you.